All right, so we're on, man. Good to see you this morning.
Joey, good morning. How are you, man?
I'm fantastic, ready to rock and roll. You?
Yeah, excellent. I had a really decent run earlier. Kicked my own butt. Feels good when you're finished with the training, you know, the beginning of it's tiring. Baseball season, we're playing some baseball here a little bit.
Are you?
I'm getting my body ready so I don't break it or injure it anywhere, you know. I'm doing sprint work and distant running. You know how it is. So, yeah, man, things are looking up. Things are going well overall. Unique times for everyone, as we all know. But, yeah, feeling pretty good, feeling pretty balanced, and getting to know myself well, taking advantage of these self-reflective times, you know, reframing consciousness a little bit, looking at the bright side of things.
Yeah.
So, yeah, man,
All right.
how have you been?
Good. Yeah, fantastic, man. I've been training a lot. I told you a couple weeks ago, I injured my wrist playing guitar, dude. I played guitar for like 6-7 hours and I wasn't ready for it, and it like froze up. It feels really weird, but all is good, man. Give me a chance to run a lot. So yeah, man, looking forward to the talk today about cleanliness and order and arrangement. And I put feng shui in our notes because of how that sense of cleanliness and orderliness sort of has an energetic component to it. And that energetic component points to this notion of flow and circulation. And that moves us into, flow, circulation, cleanliness again, and purity. And that can also lead to breath and spirit. So there's a nice little progression here towards what I'm thinking about today.
Well, this is cool. You just brought to my mind right to the surface just now. I hadn't thought about it previously. In the work with the energy centers of the body, the chakras, the acronym PEMS, physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. And thinking about, you also use the term ambiance and ambient, which means to surround. And so it's amazing to me to think about how there's physical flow in a setting of climate, like you brought up hygiene, and there's like emotional flow, right? You can be hurt or messed up with stuff from the past or anticipatory about the future and not present. And so your emotions aren't flowing. You're not setting the right climate. There could be mental, catastrophe in your mind, your aptitudes unbalanced, whatever, you're not cognating, flowing right. And then spiritual, like the harmonization of the oneness of the spirit. So just now, as we're talking, that's a really pertinent point. Like there's multiple different things at one time. And I thought about, as you were talking, I was thinking about Qigong and Tai Chi, or even like martial arts, like where there's a flow and blocking and punching. And then like when you and I are sparring, or some of the buddies were sparring hard in jiu-jitsu, some of the most amazing moments, like when no one's hurt, but an amazing sweep, a counter sweep, submission sweep, blah, 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 blah. And you get done, and it was almost like this, just this zen and this flow of combat. No one was hurt. Everyone turned into circles, it was like this amazing dance, if you will, of sparring combat. And then I thought about like a middle infielder, scooping the ball, flow up, turn first base, getting that runner out. So everything has these little zen moments with flow. An amazing client of mine in Nashville, Cal Turner Jr., amazing man. He talked about how important it was to set the climate. This is when I was leaving graduate school. And I thought that was no matter where you are, even writing an email, setting the climate with clients or with friends or with family or having people over. Yeah, so specify for me a little bit. I liked the term ambient, and it means to surround, to encompass is one definition. Where do you want to go with this talk right now? Because it seems to be about a balance. Or when I'm wakeboarding behind a boat or kite surfing, there's definitely a flow. There's something going on. Everything has to be lined up perfectly for it to work, or it goes really bad. So yeah, man, interesting topic. You have it right here, bro.
Well, how in order to really feel healthy, we have to have a certain amount of flow, and we have to have a certain amount of stationariness, right? We have to have our movement and then our rest, and how those two things affect each other. If we don't if we don't get the good rest, we don't have the same energy for our flow throughout the day with our exercise or whatever. Likewise, if we don't flow, if we don't have our exercise, if we don't have our movement, if we don't have our things going on, we won't rest as well. And that goes back to the PEMS thing, where
Yeah.
where if we don't have our emotional flow right, we won't rest as well. If we
True.
and if our minds are stuck on things, we'll notice things pop up in our dream realm. And there's a lot to be said for how we allow things to flow, but we don't. But just like water, if we're like imagining ourselves as a body of water that's moving, for the most part, we want to be steady moving. We might not want to be raging like a river that's overflowing and, like as Bruce Lee says, crashing. Like we don't want to always be moving so hard that we're destroying things. So I think there's a sense of, like, on either end of the spectrum of, like, too much flow or too much stationary can have its opposite effect on us, where it instead of being healthy, it becomes unhealthy. So
Yeah,
that's
I
an
agree.
interesting thing. So yeah,
Let's go yin and yang here, man. Yin and yang. The
yeah,
feminine.
that's exactly where I was
Think
thinking.
about the Dantian, the center of the sacral chakra area in a martial artist when they're breaking bricks or boards or whatever. You brought up Bruce Lee, and I'm thinking of the term utiny that I learned a few years ago regarding martial arts, and the purpose of being a martial artist is to break someone's chi if they're coming to rob you or something. The purpose of your training in martial arts is not to pummel and destroy that person. Your training is simply to break their chi, and this is huge. And if and we're talking about setting climate and ambient. And when I first learned Okinawan vertical punch fist karate, open fist striking Isshinryu karate, when I was 18 and 19, Joseph, in my mind, I thought it was about just beating the hell out of someone else. I didn't even think about defense. I saw so many awesome action movies, and I was like, yeah, flying kicks and punches, and they're going to fly. And I was really just, forgive my language, a jackass in what I thought karate was about. And I'd spar with the senseis, and I'd throw all these blows, punch, and they just barely move and dodge me, barely move, and I'd be completely exhausted with my yang energy and never touch anything, just swinging at air. A couple times having my hand out begging for a moment because I was so tired, but just from swinging at them. They didn't even, they just, so their defense. So I wanted to bring up utiny, me being a neutral energy, being able to strike out, hit, and then come back to neutral. That's that yang portion of that energy. Or someone, you're striking at me, I'm able to block and take that energy defensively and then get back to neutral. That's the magic of, like, flowing like water, as Bruce Lee would teach. Or, like, for example, in bringing up jiu-jitsu, a non-striking martial art, how it is to be, you like my side control, dog. That's just some great, it's awful.
Sure. Right.
And what do I do? Do I turn into a stiff brick board on you? Or do I turn into like a sandbag or water on you?
Right.
I become like this mush, right? And that's blocking your chi versus I'm stiff, you can kill me.
Right.
So it's like malleability within this is fascinating. I'm circling back to ambiance and setting the climate. And then if you will, and then you take the floor here, this is one of my clients in Denver gave me this. It's the 7 energy centers. We each are a series of ambient energies, personality, our character, our instincts, our prime. We each are a climate being set to others, with what we are, with our fears, our anxieties, our joys, our happiness, everything, the full spectrum. What do you want to say about that?
Well, yeah, it makes me think that, one area of ambiance that most people would immediately think of is we think of physical ambiance, like right now you got a nice little picture in your background, you got better lighting, right? And there's physical ambiance. You think of lighting, home decor. I mentioned feng shui a moment ago. We'll get into that in a second. But emotional ambiance, right? When someone comes into your home or you go into their home or you just meet somewhere, somebody's either bringing some joy and some happiness and some vibrancy, or they're bringing their ambiance of sadness and victimhood, or they're bringing their ambiance of anger and pissed offness or frustration. And then the other thing you were talking about, ambiance means to circle, right? It seems that's the feminine kind of symbolism, and how so much of it is narrative driven. the story. Let me circle you in the story. The ambiance is, this isn't fair. The ambiance is, you've done wrong. The ambiance is, you need to change. You need to get on board. Or the ambiance is, hey, it's great for us to be together. Isn't this amazing? Look at the beautiful sunset, or whatever. So I think that it's very cool how you brought up, you know, the emotional ambiance and the mental ambiance, and then you get to the spiritual ambiance of realizing that all these things aren't going to be perfect, and that, you know, from my perspective, there's like 2 or 3 words when it comes to spiritual ambiance is, you know, forgiveness, redemption, and grace. Those 3 words tend to bring me to the spiritual ambiance of things, you know, being graceful with each other.
Do you remember Dr. Chitamanel's teachings on replacement theology, inclusive theology? Yep. There was 4 of them. But putting that to the side, more simple terms, because that's some pretty complex theology on understanding religious distinctions and diversity, whether you're a proselytic or missiological construct, or you don't even want converts, all that crap.
Right.
But then if you're brought up in Christocentrism as an exclusivist, or if you're an inclusivist, you recall, religious pluralistic, and comparative theological. Remember, that was like the icing on the cake.
Yes.
I'm no longer, remember, it was an advancement out of pluralism.
Yes.
Remember?
Yes.
Pluralism?
Yeah.
I thought, oh, now I've arrived at pluralism. And they're like, well, if you don't stand for anything, you'll fall for it. If you don't stand for anything at all, you know, you don't believe in one thing at all, then you just dissipate. You have no significance. So then there's the maturation of a comparative theologian that has conversations with the Buddhist or the Islamic person, whomever, you know.
Right.
So I think when you brought up spiritual ambiance, I think the one of the yuckiest issues in my life with spiritual ambiance, and we should distinguish some religious, we should talk about the term religion here too, but just from a spiritual perspective. And then let's say Joseph and Nicholas are having a conversation on a podcast and they say, hey, I'm a Christian. And I'm a Christian too. There's a high percentage of the audience that's going to automatically assume that we're exclusivists.
Right.
Because we're Christians.
Yeah.
Then, well, let's stretch that. And this was when I got into undergrad. After I'd been a minister for many years, I'm back in undergrad studying cultural and religious studies, and I became an inclusivist. And man, I thought that was the bee's knees, because eventually you'll come to what I know as is Christ. You might be Buddhist right now or a Hindu person, but eventually you'll come see sweet Jesus, right? But then by Vanderbilt Div, I started seeing pluralism, and that gave footing for a voice for everyone, right? Equanimity. Mm-hmm. And then circling to comparative theologian, I would say I value my Christian set more than ever, but I'm not saying you need to be what I am. Mm-hmm. And I was bringing this up to say there's a spiritual issue within our Christian culture. I'd say a subculture of American culture. Mm-hmm. The Christian communities, a high percentage of them are misunderstood. There are, now this is a distinction point too, in any world religion, there's always a small percentage of them that are highly fundamentalistic. Mm-hmm. And to the point of, you know, what some people, they would, back in the day, some Christians, we won't get into detail about it, but you would have a conversion experience or they would slay you with a sword. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So Christianity has a lot of baggage on it. We're bringing up spiritual ambiance right now. Mm-hmm. What would you like to say about setting a fresh, contemporary 2020 climate for Christocentrism in our current situation? It's a common thread amongst us all in our nation.
It is.
What do you want to say about setting a less exclusive and even a less inclusive climate?
Yes, I know. That's a very interesting way to say that. A less exclusive and a less inclusive way simultaneously. Most people, that's going to just rattle their brains. Because what you just said is great. It's another way of understanding ambiance when it comes to spiritual. And what I was saying is grace, forgiveness, and redemption. Those are the things that I pull from Christianity to be the kind of, in many ways, the bee's knees of Christianity, man. Is I see that so much of what the spiritual ambiance is, it's operating an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, victim, once victim, now sort of turning into oppressiveness if we're not careful. I think that model is a good way of looking at it, and I think that
that's where my mind goes from training, academia training, to
yeah,
help
well,
categorize a little.
and you know, I've noticed this in terms of the yoga world as a yoga instructor. You know, there's Christians that love yoga, and then there's people that are scared to go to a yoga studio because they think they're worshiping some other god or something like that. And you know, being able to understand what pluralism is or comparative theology is very important. And I think that one thing that I learned because I was like you, like in the sense that, you know, probably when I was young, a bit more exclusive, thinking that, you know, I don't know, I'm scared of all those other religions a little bit because maybe those people are all going to hell or something like that. That's where the mind is. So, and then inclusive, mine wasn't so much they're all going to eventually come to see Christ as much as it was I'm just supposed to include them and love them, and maybe God will save them, kind of thing. But it wasn't so much that I necessarily thought they'd all convert to Christ, or it was like the sense of all religions point to the same mountaintop. So there's many roads to the same place, which in divinity school, I remember reading a book by that same guy, Paul Nitter. Well, I think it was Paul Nitter.
I was about to bring him up. K-N-I-T-T-E-R. Paul Nitter.
And he was talking. And he was talking about, instead of like, you know, there's one mountaintop and there's only one road to that mountaintop, or there's only one mountaintop and many roads to the same place. There might be many different mountaintops, and they're all and they're not necessarily quote unquote equal and even mountaintops. They're just different.
They don't even have the same goal.
They don't even have the same goal, exactly. So, and then realizing that maybe from a truly universalizing place, realizing that Christ can even exist outside of what we understand of as Christianity. But that can be kind of confusing because,
well, you get into Christ consciousness, you get into concepts and divinos from within, from what the salvific moment of Christ did on the cross and the resurrection, the ascension, everything. May I step into, and I didn't know we'd talk about this today, and we're going the 7 energy centers. Biblically, you can find in the book of Isaiah, but I want to go over the 7 world religions using these 7 energy centers. And this doesn't completely line up from an evolutionary, I'd say, chronological time period when it comes to evolved consciousness, but from a world globalistic perspective, not just studying Christianity, right?
Right.
Not just studying the lens of the Christian bubble and the New Jerusalem, but studying and realizing that, realistically speaking, there's many diverse cultures with many different world religiosities. I'm stereotyping by breaking it down into 7. You may or may not recall me sharing this with you before. I can't remember which book.
I do kind of remember this, and you know.
Okay.
Yeah.
So here's the 7 major world religions from the Roy G. Biv, from base up to crown. Hinduism, base, sacral chakra, Taoism, 3rd chakra, Islam, 4th chakra, Christianity, 5th chakra, Judaism, 6th chakra, Buddhism, 7th chakra, Confucianism. And so, okay, right now there are people that exist in each of these 7 categories that walk and breathe and exercise reverence and seek a higher power, right? And there's perversion in each of these religiosities, and there's peace and healing in each of these religiosities. And of course, probably the most threatening one to us from our perspective and our post-colonial mindset of what we've been educated in is probably Islam. Right. But to have awareness of all 7 of them, just as a, you know, looking at the entire global consciousness, whatever religion you find yourself being reared in and brought up in, or the one you convert and push to, that's going to end up being a different ambient for you as a long-term in your life, as you evolve into different versions of yourself. If you're a Buddhist sitting before me, or if you're a Christian or a Jewish, or if you're even an Orthodox, Reform, or Messianic Jew, or if you're a Hindu or a Taoist practitioner, you're going to become to chime with that certain ambient. What do you have to say about that? And I like giving everyone room. But I love Christ. I'm a Christian. So it's a tricky, and I offend some of my brothers in Christ with this type of conversation because they feel like I'm watering down the gospel. Well, you know, and to that nature.
But so there's 2 things, and I understand that whole having some healthy conflict. both with external religiosities, and internally within the Christian faith. One thing is in terms of which of those religions lined up with each of the chakras. I felt like there was a difference last time I remember, but it doesn't you know yeah, whatever the case is, wherever each one fits, we could sort of go on about that, but just as a little side post, I think that what ends up happening is there's a different attunement, just like playing a different chord on a guitar. Some people are trying to sound like the A, some people are trying to sound like the E, some people want to be the D, the C, whatever it is. So I think that we're not necessarily all supposed to have the same sound, the same ambient. I think that we're supposed to have some difference. I think that within each faith, though, we learn how to be able to strum multiple chords, right? So if Christianity tends to be producing one sort of sound, that within our Christianity, we start to learn how to make other sounds. And that can be a little weird to the Christian ears. Like, why are you talking about chakras? Because from a fundamentalist perspective, new age, get it away from me, it's new age. And that becomes the big box that you can throw everything into and then throw it away. Just like, you remember when we studied post-colonialism, my teacher was Richard King. I don't know if you took him, but that whole concept of how Hinduism even came into existence.
Was from Christian missiological interpretation?
Yeah.
Was it from us going over there trying to interpret them?
Yeah, exactly. And we saw this stuff that was confusing to the colonial Christian, and these people weren't even in alignment with each other. Like
no. You could be atheist, you could be polytheist, you could be monotheist, and you could still be Hinduistic.
And then they said, oh, okay, all that stuff, that's all those different things, one category, Hinduism, boom, now we can deal with it. And then
now we need to convert them to Christianity, right?
And then people within that big cultural label, when they were trying to explain themselves to Westerners, they're like, yeah, I'm a Hindu, right? That's what you all call me. That's what I am. Because so they start using the label. So I think that's a really interesting thing when people, harp on Hinduism, because, it's kind of like, at least the way I understand it, it's almost like we created it and then used the category to exclude them.
It was a more for me too. It made me really take another step back and shut my mouth when I learned about how we kind of have projected upon the third all over the world. That's our manifest destiny mindset as Americans, and the Christological conversion, seeking the converts, as I think Acts 1:8, it teaches that throughout the greater parts of the world, Judea, Samaria, and the outer parts of the world. And so that's a big riff in how I'm so passionate as a Christian. And I did have issues studying certain New Age, I'll say Christianities at first. And I did feel the rift between, and I could identify that they do we're talking about setting a climate.
Yeah. Right.
Churches are very religious, if you will, which means to bind and to hold back, religar. I went to Mile High Church in Denver, Colorado, is a lot different than a Southern Baptist church in Andalusia, Alabama.
Right.
And I think the shame, guilt, and grief is an issue that makes people repulsed against certain Christian teachings. But to distinguish real quick between New Age and traditional, conventional Christianity,
right,
I think the main thing I saw as a distinction that I think is almost a paradox to talk about. Clarify this for me if you can. And most of the biblical, theological, Christian teachings, you're a sinner and you've fallen short of the glory of God. You wretched piece of trash, you must be reborn. So it's like you need something from external to yourself to experience a salvific moment with the Christ, renewing yourself, cleansing yourself, asking for forgiveness. That thing now in a New Age ambient is, it points toward interiority. It points toward self-actualization. It points toward that light is already within you and you have it. And you can call on that light and you can heal. And so even tied tragically in a yoga conversation about what those postures are for, I learned there's 3 different reasons for Hinduism or practice of Hinduism: for posturing, for bringing on deity, or to study the sacred text back in the day. So it was an exercise thing. There's all these different categories, right? What do you think about this? I have felt uncomfortable in New Age church experiences. I felt very uncomfortable in Pentecostal, certain church experiences, or other, hardcore Christian. What ambient needs to be set to make, that quote, Christianity has yet to it's been tried and found wanting. It is yet to actually ever have been exercised appropriately. I can't recall who said it, but what is the dross in the system with the Christian contemporary message as we think about an ambient for the Great Commission? Where do you have anything? I was fascinated by interfaith dialogue in graduate school, and meeting with these other religiosities and holding the pride of my own religion. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the least attractive things about a lot of modern Christianity and the Christianity that I was brought up in was a heavy dose of fear. Like, I mean, obviously there's this idea we've talked about, fear versus reverence of God. Fear versus reverence. I think that distinction's not made. Like, God, you fear a grizzly bear in a healthy way, but you don't sit around your house worrying about being attacked by a grizzly all day. And there's a difference between fear that's more like reverence and fear that's like paranoia and like persecution, like God's punishing me fear. So there's that. And again, back to the guilt. What's the function of guilt? Guilt's you feel it so that you change and you move in a different direction, but you don't want to stay in a steady state of guilt, which can be programmed into us from Christianity. And I heard I forget who it was, but they said one of the worst things Christianity ever did was institutionalize guilt as though it were a virtue. Oh, I'm more guilty than you, man. You don't understand how guilty I am compared to you. And then that breeds that unhealthy martyrdom complex where we then pretend not to have an ego, but we really have a hell of an ego because we're the most spiritual. And then we become doormats and we don't learn how to defend ourselves and protect ourselves or rebuke others who are trying to throw an ambiance upon us, circle us in with their narratives and their straw manning of Christianity. And then we act like weak little people that aren't in touch with God. And not that we're going around with a big stick threatening people, but we're not necessarily, God's not necessarily saying, hey, I put you on earth so that you go and everybody just messes with you all the time and that you're just, I mean, I realize it does fall on a certain mentality within us as Christians, a lot of times the heavy energies of the universe. So, and maybe you could talk a little bit about that too, in terms of the ambiance of like, holding ourselves in a healthy self-defense without being defensiveness, right? How to protect ourselves as Christians. That might be a really good thing to kind of,
Well, with a few senseis I was hanging out with, just extraordinary talented. I was like, man, it's kind of tricky being trained in martial arts, bro. It's like, if it goes down, man, you can really do a lot of damage. And sensei, I feel nervous. We were having a drink at the bar, just talking, about martial arts and how it changes you. And he said, Nicholas, I'd like to flip the coin on you. He said, there's also a great calm and strength with an advanced martial artist. And when there's something going on in the room, you can take care of business very peacefully because you know what you're equipped with.
Right.
And so he had kind of like a sage moment with me, like, dude, quit thinking your karate is to fly across the room and hi-ya and kung fu panda everybody, dude, grow up. But you do have this training on you, now wear it, and I almost I think about the armor of God. And I'll tell you in my training, and anyone can get their ass kicked. Anyone can be beat. No one's, impenetrable. Anyone can get whacked. Just a few pounds right there. We go night night. Jiu-jitsu teaches you that. But the good Lord told me, if you continue to train, and basically in my own intuition, if you abuse this, you will lose it. But if you honor this, I will give you this power. And that's kind of like I'm not allowed to use it, bro. You know, so
Right.
there's a certain ambient there. And I think that goes for any sport,
Mm-hmm.
anything one picks up. And I'm a mediocre, I'm not advanced martial artist, but for anyone that is, you just feel an aura about them, someone that's really committed their whole life to a specific practice. And you're like, wow, it could be a guitar, but there's a climate being set. So it's almost like a tuning. I think we're talking about energy and harmony again. Heart math, you know, concepts of heart math and how many bioenergy cords come off the heart chakra to connect to other people. Like you and I have been friends a long time. We've had a few times where we get irritated with one another, and we got to kind of hash it out and have a hard dialogue with one another. And that ambient, we normally have that flow as bros. We get a little frustration for a moment. Got to figure that out, you know.
Right.
It's good to keep all those energies flowing and open everywhere. What did you say you wanted me to speak more clearly to? I thought you were going to say exercise and diet and nutrition is harm.
Like,
what were you about?
What is, okay. As we're looking at, the world has gone from exclusive, like our culture has gone from exclusive to highly inclusive, to the point that now we see the manifest destiny energies that a lot of groups are pointing to as though that's why Christianity is bad, that's why colonialism is bad, that's why white Europeans are bad, that's why male is bad, right? A lot of that right there is that manifest destiny is now finding itself working through non-traditional groups, let's say, whatever, not as dominant. And what I'm getting at is, it seems that there's a time now where a lot of Christians feel like they're being backed up against the ropes a little bit, wondering how to appropriately defend themselves when we find ourselves under attack as Christians in some sort of way. So how is it that we appropriately defend ourselves without having that enantiodromic flip to where we turn into the bad guys? Because all of a sudden we got punched in the face one time, that doesn't give us the right to like shoot somebody, let's say, right? And we know this from martial arts, that there comes a point where you stop the issue, but you do not go to other levels once you have the power. Right.
You actually slow down the submission. For any jiu-jitsuites out there that may listen to this podcast, right, you know good and well when you know what you're doing and you can hold someone in a dominant position. When you go to put that submission and you don't have to rush it, there's nowhere they can really go. Right. And you actually have to respect your sparring partner. And so you can have a sparring partner the next week. You have to slow down the Americano or the leg triangle or whatever and literally look for them to get time to tap. If you did it aggressively and fast, you'd rip their arm out of socket before they could respond. And so that gentle river concept has really helped me with my Ambience. I really, this is something people should know about martial arts as well. Like a striking, violent, like street karate, like Ishinru. If you train in something like that, it gets in your head. You'll dream about it. You'll start wondering about it. You'll sometimes, as an idiot, want to test it, not on just a punching bag. Right. And so when I was only trained in karate, I was nervous, kind of, man. You know, I told you about this before. And then jiu-jitsu was like, oh, wow, what a different form of combat. Wow. And the calmness of that art ended up, my essence, I absorbed some of that nature of that art. And now that correlates into my day-to-day life. You know, I may handle situations slightly different because of that. And same as with religiosity. When I've been through conflict or separations or whatever in the past, my biblical training and like, especially like the book of Proverbs, the beatific vision, parts of the gospels, and just the nature of upward and onward and the teaching of the spirit, that helped me through challenging times. So yeah, as we talk about Ambience here, I think it's more about balancing all those energy centers with whatever. I'd like to disclaim with whatever religiosity you are. As I named this earlier, you know, Hinduism, Taoism, Islam, Christianity, Judaism, Buddhism, Confucianism. Of course, if you're any religiosity, you're using all of those 7 energy centers on your body, right? But that was just the way one book broke it down. And it does make interest to me that the heart center, the heart chakra is Christianity, and Christianity is all about love. But we can also say that all world religiosities are hopefully about love in some form or another, you know?
Yeah. And love takes many shapes. You know, love has been.
Absolutely.
You think about I mean, even father versus mother love, and that all of a sudden it becomes a dichotomy, and you can't just say one and the other. But there's something to be said about the type of love. There you go. The type of love that's like a little bit more strict. Look, I'm going to put discipline on you. There will be a little bit of a punishment if this doesn't get done. Look, so there's like that rigid love. And then there's that always merciful. Oh, it's okay. You're always going to be my special little boy, little girl, you know, that kind of thing. So there's different kinds of love. And again, I think that, you know, you're talking about in martial arts with self-defense, because this is what I was asking you about, self-defense. And you're talking about a lot of it's just not using what you got, which is the counterintuitive thing, bringing calm, letting the other person exhaust themselves, maybe get in the dominant position, let them, you know, do what they got to do. And I think that, you know, a couple things is, one is a lot of times if we're trying to just intellectually have a conversation, sometimes people go from, we think it's a jujitsu match, to all of a sudden they start punching, meaning they start pointing out personal faults. Well, what about you? You're so that, and all of a sudden they went from jujitsu to striking, you know, and you're like, wait a second, that's not fair. Or they go from, hey, I saw what your thoughts were online, and now somebody's burning down your house. They're jumping in. They're going from a fist fight to weapons fighting at that point, in my opinion. So there's one thing I'd like to say with that. The other thing is this: in terms of combat, it actually is bringing in a lot of the feminine energy, and feminine energy is to calm the situation so that there's not more fighting. And what's funny is I've seen these memes about the future is female and all this and that, and I see what's going on the streets and how much of it is actually, you know, women involved. It's all, what I see out there is such another representation of an unhealthy use of masculine energy, whereas it does seem that what a lot of Christianity is teaching is feminine. It's a calming, it's a relaxing, it's a like, let's not judge, let's be merciful, let's be compassionate, let's understand.
If we'd like to get feminine and masculine, let's transcend the conversation around sexism or gender right now and talk about every human being having a soul and a mind. The mind is masculine, the soul is feminine.
Right.
I'm not trying to sit here and say that's
yes,
just a
of course. There's
some,
yeah, I know. It's easy to get
Christ had feminine qualities, if you will. He exercised benevolence and love. The messianic thought toward him was that he would rule with the sword. The Judaic communities couldn't understand that he could possibly be because he did what? Did not use the sword.
That's
so
right.
It isn't a feminine. Now that conversation can go back and forth. This is very interesting to me. I want to close in a few minutes thinking about what does this bring to your surface right now about the setting of a climate? Because to me, I want to talk about my closing here to wrap this, man, is the chameleonization of any person. Let's say I'm a bartender. I've also done ministry. I'm a wood guy. I do cabinetry. I play baseball. I'm a dad. And let's say like I'm a bartender. I'm a certain frequency. I have my bartending hat on, and each person coming in is their own little ambient, right? And then if I did any type of biblical theology and study, that's a different hat, different tuning of my own system. I seem like a completely different person versus me being a daddy or a baseball player or me in the woods. So I would like to celebrate each human. It's so silly to try to put someone in a box and limit them, each human, to think that they may or may not be what they were before, but I guarantee you most people have transformed into better versions of themselves. So if you're hanging on a stagnated view of someone, you're misconceiving and you're limiting yourself. So my encouragement here is to set the ambiance with yourself and with others to where it's clean and open and welcoming. And you know how awful it can be if you fight and argue with someone. It can be so draining and bad on your system. And you know how lovely it can be when you're in a rapport with kindred spirits, having fellowship. So I think that's the main thing right now during these trying times. I think I posted it the other day. My battery's at 10%, Joseph, is why I got to wrap in a moment. I don't want to just go zook. Yeah. But like love, don't make anyone a priority if they consider you only to be an option. And if you know someone doesn't have goodwill and toward you, withdraw. So celebrate those that make you a priority. Respect those that consider you to be an option. But man, if you know someone's doing you dirt, man, withdraw and protect yourself. You don't have to go hurt them. And that was just my own little, when I was praying and meditating in the morning, I was thinking about my love language and my relationships in my life with family and friends and all. And keep people that you really care for close to yourself, because they help you set your own climate, you know?
Yeah. And I think when it comes to withdrawing, I think there's a healthy way to withdraw and an unhealthy way to withdraw too, you know? And
absolutely.
I've noted we live in an age of delete, block, ghost, that kind of thing, or be passive aggressive in our withdrawing, which is it doesn't serve us well.
Or headbutt it. When I get confronted, I will run toward it too much. I won't withdraw as much as I need to. That's why that's so special to speak.
Right.
You know,
right.
It comes in. So it's like the more mature nature of myself. Brother, thank you for this talk. And I look forward to what next week and the topic. And Price, I want to bring up, more understanding of the energy centers of the body sometime in one of these talks, and the dichotomy between each one. Because when I look at, like the sovereign versus the martyr, or the lover versus the performer in the heart, that really helped me mature, because I could say in my heart, your heart's either loving or it's just performing, trying to get love, but not really being self. And when you're aware of that, like, all right, am I just being a performer right now, or am I really loving?
Yeah.
And so I carry that into perhaps one of our next few topics, however you'd like to weave that in. And it helps understand it. And then it's about balancing those,
Right.
Thank you for this, brother. What do you want to say in closing?
Yeah. Thank you. We kind of, based on what we said we were going to do and how it turned out well. So this is going to be a little different than how the intro went. We didn't talk about cleanliness or feng shui or a lot of these things, but that's all right, man. So we've always got more to talk about. So I think that's it, man. I appreciate it. And yeah, I'll try to get this up sometime in the next few hours, and I'll talk to you soon.
Let me know when you're out this way, man. We got to roll soon, and we have some other buddies coming over to Jits with us as well.
Yeah, I'm going to be up there soon. So
all right, man. Take care. Much love, brother.
Much love. Peace.
Peace.